quite a bit tonight. Last week we began this teaching on Revelation. Is there any questions before we get going? We talked a little bit about the purpose so that we could have good context going into this. Last week we ended up with warnings, Old Testament warnings concerning, let me say it like this, Old Testament prophecies concerning the judgment of Jerusalem because the Messiah and his kingdom arrives. And many people don't understand that this is prophesied in many different books, prophetic books of the Old Testament, that when the kingdom arrives, there's also going to be a divine judgment on Jerusalem. Jerusalem is called the Great City. It's called the Holy City. It's called Babylon. It's called the prostitute. It's called a lot of things. And it is prophesied that when this kingdom arrives with the Messiah, there's going to be a division, a separation of the righteous from the unrighteous. And there's many Old Testament warnings and prophecies concerning that. And Daniel even gives a timeline to us leading up to this kingdom and the judgment of the city and the temple. That's in Daniel 9, where we read last week. So tonight, I'm going to pick up from where we left off on the Old Testament warnings. I'm going to start with the New Testament warnings. And I'm going to go through a lot, but this is recorded, so you can go back through it, and you'll need to go through it more than once for sure. So without further ado, let me share my screen here. We're going to start with New Testament, John the Baptist, of course. John the Baptist announces the kingdom and warns Jerusalem's rulers that wrath is about to come. Many people have been taught that all these wrath verses, destruction verses, judgment verses are for some end time scenario, all of these things. But it indeed is not. And it is very negligent to teach the Bible in the way that people do when it's all so clearly laid out. All we have to do is just read what it says. Okay. John the Baptist announces the kingdom and warns Jerusalem's rulers that wrath is about to come. Matthew 3:2. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Verse 7. But when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to his baptism, he said to them, "You brood of vipers, why is John the Baptist talking to these leaders of Israel, the Pharisees and Sadducees? Why is he talking to them so rudely?" I mean, he hasn't even heard Jesus go around rebuking these guys yet. Jesus's ministry literally, quote unquote, hasn't started, right? John the Baptist has got some kind of a beef with these guys. What kind of a beef is it? Well, John the Baptist is an Old Testament prophet, and being an Old Testament prophet, he is well versed in the prophecies concerning the arrival of the Messiah and his kingdom and what it means for Jerusalem. It means its destruction and the destruction of the temple, what Jesus calls the consummation of the age, or the end of the age. All right. This is why John is the forerunner here. Repent, for the kingdom is at hand. And this phrase, we don't see anyone using it after the ascension of Jesus. This is because they were making an announcement really to Israel. Jesus himself said, I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Why? Because Israel had become apostate. They had become very evil in the eyes of the Lord and had been that way for many hundreds of years. This is God's, Jesus quotes the verse, but God has sent prophets and messengers and people to warn Israel to repent. And he even sent his son. They killed and stoned the prophets, and they killed his son. All right. That's coming with a prophesied judgment. When the Messiah arrives with his kingdom, the judgment also arrives with the Messiah. And this is why John the Baptist says in verse 7, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? That is the wrath prophesied by Daniel, Micah, Malachi, Ezekiel, and others. Okay? It's for the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, the city and the temple, because they broke covenant with God. They turned from God. They killed the prophets. They killed his son. We'll go over some of those verses. Maybe you kind of remember some of those yourself. Who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? The wrath meaning the as Jesus put it, the vengeance of these days, which is going to culminate in the complete leveling of Jerusalem and the removal of the temple. It's so complete. No event happens like this in this time period. It's so complete that Jerusalem ceases to exist for nearly 2,000 years. They wiped it off the map. They built a new city in its place, named it give it a different name. The Romans did, put a new temple in there after their god Jupiter. Even the trees surrounding Jerusalem were all cut down. Josephus, a Jewish historian who has written about this event because he eyewitnessed it, said that if anyone had come upon Jerusalem at right after its destruction, where they demolished everything, not a single building was left, even the temple was dismantled and removed, they would not have recognized where they were because it looked like a desert. There were no trees left because they cut them all down to create crucifixes to murder people. And the rampage of murder had gone on for a number of years prior to the desolation of Jerusalem. And that was led by Nero and others. And then Titus, who comes in, ends up surrounding Jerusalem as is prophesied, tearing it down, fulfilling the words that Jesus spoke, and not just his words, the words of prophecy by many who wrote about it. This is what John is saying to the Pharisees and Sadducees, calling them a brood of vipers, who warned you to flee the wrath that is to come. Matthew 3:10, even now, 3 verses later, even now the axe is laid to the root of the tree. The axe is laid to the root of the trees, speaking of this impending judgment. Every tree, therefore, that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. This is not talking about when the bodily return of Jesus and the final judgment. This is talking about, in context, the judgment that's prophesied to come upon Jerusalem, and Jesus spoke about it. John preached about it. It's taught about over and over. The Gospels, much of the Gospels, are a constant warning of Jerusalem, of the true Israelites to come out of apostate Israel. So the kingdom's arrival and the impending judgment are one announcement with John and with Jesus. The kingdom's establishment, therefore, includes a first century judgment on those who killed and stoned the prophets. It's not just a new covenant and now Gentiles are accepted by God. No, this is a complete package here. And we're going to see the role of Jesus and why he's so amazing because of what he did. He's done something that you're probably not aware of that is going to be come very clear if we can make it to the end tonight. Now, Matthew 13:36, Jesus, speaking of Jesus, Matthew writing, and we're going to go through some passages here from Matthew and Luke that are synchronous, right? It's the same passages written by two different authors. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. He just gave this parable of the weeds in the field. You can go read that, but I'm going to give his explanation of it. He answered, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, right? This is referring to his language against the Pharisees and Sadducees. John the Baptist, of course, sharing it, but Jesus himself told them, your father is the devil, the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. This phrase literally means the consummation of the age. This is not, some translations say end of the world. That's not correct, and it gives a it's misleading because it means it leads you to think, oh, that's when Jesus returns, the end of the world. No, none of this is in that context. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so it will be at the end of the age, the consummation of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom, all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. Why is he saying, he who has ears, let him hear? Because he is speaking of the divine judgment that's been prophesied, that's coming, because he has arrived. And this is included in his announcement of the good news, right? The good news is the arrival of the kingdom and the removal of these things that come to destroy the prophets that God sent, the Son that God sent, and then leading up to Jerusalem's destruction, the desolation of the Christians. You can read these stories in different places, but Nero used to light his gardens with Christians on crosses and the whole thing. That hell is part of the good news that Jesus came to implement, because it is written that God's going to bring this system and this order to a complete halt. All right, you'll see it as we go on more and more. You're going to have to be willing to let yourself see these things this way, and by this way I mean in context. You can't just read a verse, pull it out, cherry pick it, and think, that sounds like this. No. We're reading in context. We're teaching Revelation in context. So Jesus connects this harvest to the consummation of the age and the judgment of the system that persecutes the church. Because starting around here in Matthew 13, all the way through Matthew 24 is one long discourse and one long thought, uninterrupted, about the same thing. Okay, that's the context, and we'll read it. Luke 19, which runs concurrent to Matthew's discourse, only Luke's writing. Luke 19:41, and when he drew near and saw the city, this is Jerusalem, he wept over it, saying, would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that would make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you to the ground. Okay, this is all in the context of what Daniel has prophesied. Jesus quotes Daniel about 4 times in the Gospels concerning what's getting ready to happen to Jerusalem, including this verse right here. Okay, so, and you have to understand, because we're teaching Revelation, we'll get there by the end of the night, but we have to set all this up. Revelation, the visions, the major visions of Revelation all come from the book of Daniel, and Jesus is setting the timeline of Daniel's prophecies to be fulfilled against the city and the temple, which will be destroyed. And as Jesus says here, he uses the same words. He's setting that timeline to occur at the arrival of the Messiah and his kingdom. And Jesus is saying, hey, the time is fulfilled. The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe the good news. Okay. So this is the thing that Jesus is going all out throughout Israel, warning people to enter, to follow him, to come into this kingdom, to come into life, because God is getting ready to judge the harlot, as it says in King James. Other translations say the prostitute. I kind of like the harlot better. You and your children within you, and they will not leave one stone upon the other, upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Okay, so part of Jesus's witness to the world that he is the Messiah is the fulfillment of these things, because he has announced it, right? It's been prophesied. We went over a lot of those prophecies last week. Now Jesus is saying it out of his mouth, this is coming. It's going to happen in this generation. The vengeance of these days, which we're getting ready to read, is to fulfill all that's written, right? Jesus is saying this is going to be fulfilled imminently. It's getting ready to happen. It's not for a time in the future. It's for now. And the fact that it happened is a sign of heaven to the whole world that Jesus is the one that God has been speaking about, prophesying about this whole time. Luke 21, more verses here in the same theme, the same conversation. Starting at verse 5, we're going to read a chunk here. And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with noble stones and offerings, they're right there in Jerusalem, looking at the temple. He said, as for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. He's talking about the destruction, the prophesied destruction of the temple. And they asked him, teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign that these things are about to take place? Obviously, right? They want to know, hey, when's this going to happen? What can we expect to see right before it happens? Why? Because they don't want to be around when this happens. Jesus doesn't want them to be around either, because he warns them to flee. And he said, see that you're not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, the time is at hand. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. What is the end in context? The destruction of the temple, the end of the temple, not the end of the world as it's been nefariously taught. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. This is all leading up to the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. This is not, you see an angel floating in the sky, or God writes, in the sky with his finger. These signs from heaven are the fulfillment of the things written, right? Signs from heaven are the fulfillment of things prophesied, the things that Jesus is saying are coming. But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. Speaking of the reign of Nero, right? Delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it therefore in your minds, not to meditate beforehand how to answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up, even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends. Some of you will be put to death. What's the context? Leading up to the consummation of the age, the destruction of the temple. That's the whole context here. You will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your lives. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. And this is, again, another reference to Daniel, the abomination of desolation. What is the abomination? It is in context, and we'll teach it, but I'm trying to get the time period locked in, airtight, watertight, gavel slammed case where without a doubt, cannot be argued, cannot be, seen in any other way. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation has come near. The abomination of desolation, the abomination is the gathering of these hordes led by Nero and his army and the client kings who have come beside him to destroy Jerusalem and demolish the temple as prophesied. Let those in Judea who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Okay, who's in Judea? Well, Jerusalem is in Judea. And when all of these Roman armies come together and enclose Jerusalem, they start to draw near together. Let everybody in Judea flee. Why? Because it is at hand, right? When will these things happen? And what are the signs? Well, he's telling us when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation has come near. Okay? Then let those who are in Judea flee. Judea is a huge area, and Jerusalem's kind of in the middle. Let those who are inside the city, inside Jerusalem, depart, and let not those who are out in the country enter it. Why? Because they're going to be killed. They're going to die. For these are the days of vengeance, Jesus said, to fulfill all that is written. These are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written, speaking of what has been prophesied concerning the destruction of the city and its temple because of its apostasy, and as prophesied when the Messiah arrives. Alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled, meaning until what's been prophesied is fully carried out by the Gentiles, speaking of Rome. And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Okay, now there is some revelation language there. There's also that kind of language we see in many books of the Old Testament, and this is a literary genre that is called ancient Near Eastern military hyperbole. This is not unique to Jesus or unique to the prophets in the Old Testament. This is a literary genre classified by historians called ancient Near Eastern military hyperbole. Okay? There are many other writings from those times by other nations that have nothing to do with Bible prophecy or Israel or anything, or prophets, that use this kind of language. Obviously, he's not talking about a literal roaring of the sea. He's using hyperbole to describe how bad it's going to get. Okay? People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And when they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory, right? What's the context? In judgment. We've got, remember the prophecies, all these things we read last week, building up to this point. Now, when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. And people have taught this out of context, saying, "Oh, in the end, it's going to get so bad, but just hang on and raise your head because Jesus is about to return." No, because several years prior to this event, Jesus is describing himself. There is a complete rampage against Christians, slaughtering them one after the other. Okay, this is what the Bible calls the Great Tribulation. Okay, in the 3.5 years leading up to the destruction of the city and the temple. Okay, that's why Jesus says, hey, when you see these things begin to take place, know that your deliverance from this persecution is about to end. And he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that the summer is already near. Just saying, hey, when you see these signs, it's almost arrived. Because that's the question they asked him. So when you see these things take place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Because, again, the announcement of the kingdom comes with not only what's been prophesied concerning Christ in this new covenant, but also the judgment upon the harlot and the temple. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Okay? The vengeance of these days is to fulfill all that's written. And I tell you, truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until it's all taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So these things that Jesus has spoken, which are prophesied to happen, Jesus is just saying, now is the time of their fulfillment. Okay? Jesus foretells that Daniel's words will be fulfilled in this generation. We read those last week. Don't worry, we're going to come back through as we start at the beginning of Revelation and go through all of that stuff in Daniel in depth and explain Daniel's 70 weeks and all these things. But tonight, I'm just finishing the introduction where we talk about the warnings from the New Testament, and then we're going to hit the very end of Revelation so you can see how all of these things fit together in context. That's why I got to keep going. Jesus foretells that Daniel's words will be fulfilled in this generation. The city that is going to persecute them is going to be destroyed, as he said, when that's coming to pass, your redemption or your deliverance is drawing near. In the same conversation with Jesus recorded by Matthew, because we're just reading Luke, Jesus lays out the events leading to the desolation as prophesied by Daniel. Daniel prophesied the desolation of the city and the temple at the time of when Rome is in power and the arrival of the Messiah with his kingdom, which is part of the prophesied judgment of the kingdom, which is also coming with salvation. Matthew 24, going to read a chunk here. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon the other that will not be thrown down." And what he's describing there is the historical event that took place when the city burned, right? They starved everyone out and they murdered and killed everyone. Josephus wrote that blood was flowing like rivers out of the temple because everyone that was trying to hide in the temple was massacred. And the fires were so intense that it melted all the articles of gold and silver that were in the temple, and they leaked down into the cracks. This is from Josephus's writings. And the Romans pulled the stones off of each other to get to the molten precious metals so that they could plunder them. Okay. They ended up carting off all the stones. It was like it was never there. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, verse 3, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when these things will be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end or the consummation of the age." So we just read Luke's account. Let's read Matthew's account. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray." In fact, there were many people who had who were saying those kinds of things, trying to lead people after them. "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet." What's the end he's talking about? The destruction of the city and the temple, because that's the context here. "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and puts you to death. This is a 3.5 year period where Nero was on a gruesome conquest to wipe out Christianity. And you will be hated by all nations. We'll read some of it from Josephus's account so you can get the full picture later. You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed through the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. What is the context of the end? It is the destruction of the city and the temple. And as we know, when Jesus ascended, he poured out the Spirit, and he actually told them to go in all nations, wait for the outpouring of the Spirit. You'll receive power to be my witnesses. And then we see them going out to these nations, inviting them to the marriage supper, and we'll talk about that as well. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. We just read that part in Luke as well. That the end that will come, as I said, Jesus is referring to in verse 14, is defined by verse 15, the abomination of desolation, which is Daniel's prophecy of the destruction of the city, Jerusalem, and the temple. So the abomination in context, again, we're going to describe these things more in depth later. The abomination is the gathering of Titus and the client kings surrounding Jerusalem, which led to its complete desolation. And the desolation is the destruction of Jerusalem, burning it with fire. They killed and murdered all of its occupants and, of course, destroyed the temple. Jerusalem was in Judea, and Jesus was warning them to flee, to escape the vengeance that was coming. Okay? Here's a reminder of what we read last week from Daniel, since Jesus just quoted Daniel. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one, this is the Hebrew word for Messiah. Some translations actually say Messiah. I think King James says Messiah. Messiah shall be cut off, meaning crucified, and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The prince is referring to Titus because he is the one who led the armies against Jerusalem. And the people of the prince are the literal armies. They are the ones who came to destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood. And to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. Continuing on with Matthew in chapter 24, verse 17. Let the one who's on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. Why? Because if you stay, if you see the armies coming, if you see all this about to take place, and you stay and try to get your stuff, you're going to die. And they had, Josephus writes about this, that people ate their jewelry and their jewels and tried to escape after Jerusalem was surrounded. And the Roman armies, the soldiers, as people were trying to flee, when they learned about this, when they killed them as they were trying to flee, they would cut their stomachs open to see if they had swallowed jewels and took the jewels from their stomachs. Let the one who's in the field not turn back to take his cloak, and alas for women who are pregnant, for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Why? Because it's going to be a lot harder then. For then there will be great tribulation. This phrase, great tribulation, is also mentioned in Revelation 7:14 in the same context. Such has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. So this great tribulation is the surrounding of Jerusalem by Titus and his armies and the client kings, who we'll talk about. These are the ones that brought this great tribulation. And, Nero actually started all this by killing the Christians, and it didn't let up. And it culminated with Jerusalem's utter destruction. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would have been saved. For the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So they were cut short because God could not allow all the Christians to be killed. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs, false prophets will arise, perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I've told you beforehand, Jesus says. So if they say to you, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Speaking of the fulfillment of all these things that are written, the vengeance of these days are to fulfill all that's written. He's not talking about his second coming. The context is the desolation of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. He's saying it's going to come quickly. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. There's no hidden meaning here. He's just saying, hey, when you see the obvious signs, it's imminent. Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. He's using that ancient Near Eastern military hyperbole right here. He's just stating and borrowing language from the prophets who are speaking about this, prophesying about this event, how bad it's going to be. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. Yeah, I'm going to explain that. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with great power and glory, and he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds and from one end of heaven to the other. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as the branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that the summer is near. So also when you see all these things, this is not a hidden meaning here. He's saying in this natural comparison, so also when you see these things, know that the end is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. Then Jesus says, but concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son, but the Father only, what day and hour. It is the day and hour of the desolation of Jerusalem and the temple as prophesied. All right. Let's refer back to this phrase here, the sign of the Son of Man. The obvious thing that people would do, obvious question people would ask at that point, well, what is the sign of the Son of Man? It's not a sign that appears in the sky. Context shows us that the sign is the destruction of Jerusalem. The Greek here, because the way it's worded in English is a little confusing, the Greek literally says, you can go look it up yourself, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. At this point, the Son of Man is in heaven, and the sign is referring to the things that were said by Jesus for all to hear, that he was the Son of God and his words are faithful and true. Remember, he said, heaven and earth may pass away, but my words will never pass away. Okay. To read these things in any other context is to be negligent with the words that are written there. Okay. Now let's continue on, and we're going to jump into Revelation finally in the context of all these things, both Old and New Testament, that have been prophesied and written and spoken about by Jesus. So we have seen from context that the prophesied destruction of Jerusalem and the temple is announced by Jesus as part of the kingdom's arrival, and that it is the fulfillment of the prophecies of Daniel, Jesus quoting Daniel several times. And we have clearly established the timeline for its destruction. The vengeance of these days are to fulfill all that is written. And this generation shall not pass away until all of these things come to pass. These are both statements by Jesus in the same context. Now that we have the context, the timing, and the event in order, we can finally understand what Revelation is all about. For example, all of the major visions in Revelation, which I just referred to, come from the book of Daniel. This and the 70 weeks, which we'll look at in a little bit, in the coming weeks, together with the words of Jesus, show beyond a shadow of a doubt that this time that's being prophesied is not a time that is in our future, but rather the fulfillment of prophecies that have come to pass in that generation. If all of these things are in order, all these things we're saying and all these verses that we're putting together, if that's in order, then we should see Revelation, in fact, state that during its outpouring of tribulation and wrath, a direct reference to the judgment of apostate Israel and the city that killed the prophets and committed abominations against God is made. Okay, and we're going to jump all the way to Revelation 16 and see one of the angels who's pouring out wrath on the city quote the same verses that Jesus is referencing and that Daniel himself prophesied. Revelation's wrath and outpouring of tribulation and judgment is context, the same exact context as everything that we have read today and last week. And there is so many more verses that we could add. This, like I said last week, this will be a 4-year Bible study, but that, people don't have the endurance to endure that. That's a long time. We'll just stick with the way we're doing it here. So it's a direct reference to the judgment of apostate Israel and the city that killed the prophets and committed abominations against God. Let's jump ahead to that point in Revelation 16. So we're going to skip the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. We're going to come back to that later, because if I go into that now, you're going to be lifted off into the teachings of men and what they've said about that. We're going to go straight to chapter 16, which is the culmination of the seals, trumpets, and bowls. And it's the culmination of the great city as prophesied. That's one of the phrases that Revelation uses for Jerusalem. But before we do, remember again these words of Jesus. I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you, Jerusalem, may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth. That's quite a judgment. Jesus is saying, because I have sent you prophets, wise men, and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify. They even killed him. The judgment of that is that on Jerusalem is going to come the consequence of this behavior. All the righteous blood shed on the earth is going to be counted against it. From the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Look at this. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. That's how Jesus refers to apostate Israel. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, and then he quotes Daniel, see, your house is left to you desolate. That's from Daniel 9:26 and 27 we just read. Having read those words of Jesus, let's read the telling of it by John in Revelation, starting with 11:8, then jumping immediately to 16. The great city, right? Jesus just called the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. Where is that city that the Lord was crucified? Jerusalem. That is the great city, and symbolically is referred to Sodom and Egypt because of its apostasy to God. And here we see the destruction proclaimed by an angel, transcribed by John, against this great city who is being held legally accountable for all the righteous blood shed on the earth. Revelation 16:4, the third angel poured out his bowl into the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel in charge of the water say, just are you, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments. We have had several chapters of judgments by now. We're reading the culmination. Verse 6, for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. Let's read that again. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. And I heard the altar saying, yes, Lord God the Almighty, true and just are your judgments. A few verses later, verse 19, the great city, referring to Jerusalem, was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great, which is another symbolic reference prophetically to Jerusalem, to make, listen to this phrase, this is crazy, to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. There's not going to be any more left because he is going to drain it out. Now, we see the culmination there in chapter 16 of the judgment that several chapters in the book of Revelation spends time talking about. It's clearly leveled against Jerusalem, and it's clearly leveled at them for the reason that Jesus gave, because they are being held accountable for all the righteous blood that's been shed on the earth. Now, entering out of this judgment, we're going to see a comparison of two cities and a comparison of two women. And this comparison is very important because this is not just about judgment, right? Remember, Jesus says your redemption draws near. This is about the deliverance of the system that is bent on killing every prophet that God sends to it, and killing even the Son of God that's sent to it, and therefore kills the sons of God who have come from Jesus himself. This is a redemption. This is a restoration also, as we'll see, Revelation 17:1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters. This is, of course, referring to Jerusalem, the harlot, the great prostitute, referring to her as a woman. Revelation 18:1. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory, and he called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. This is the description of Jerusalem as prophesied, her destruction, being held accountable for all the righteous blood shed on the earth. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. The kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people." This is the ministry of Jesus, and then the church, who is also ministering to Israel, but continuing going to the nations. Come out of her. That's what Jesus is doing. I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The house of Israel is apostate. It's going to be judged. He's come for the sheep in her that are lost in the midst of this apostasy, and many did come out and follow him. Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Remember, we referenced last week Gehenna and the valley of Gehenna, and how the kings of Israel sacrificed their children within view of the temple to the demon god Molech. Okay, we're going back generations here. Sins heaped as high as heaven. Pay her back, as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed, as she glorified herself and lived in luxury. So give her a like measure of torment and moaning, since in her heart she says, I sit as queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason, her plagues will come in a single day. Speaking of the swiftness, like a flood, Daniel says it will come. Death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. Speaking of the desolation that came because of Rome surrounding the city and the murdering of every single occupant. They starved them out for a month, and it was complete and utter chaos. It was torture beyond belief what they did. Again, we'll read some of that later from Josephus, but I'm just trying to seal the deal about the point and the context of Revelation when put together with everything that's written. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment, referring to Jerusalem as a woman. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, you great city, you mighty city, Babylon. For in a single hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wool, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses and chariots and slaves, which are human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again, meaning it's all utterly destroyed. There's not a single thing left, not a single building. It's all wiped out. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear and of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city, they will say, or they said. And they threw dust on their heads and they wept and mourned, crying out, alas, alas, for the great city, right? That's not an accident that this is repeated over and over, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets. Why the rejoicing now? We're about to turn the corner. For God has given judgment for you against her. Because this woman who is apostate and evil, whose own religious leaders did not recognize the Messiah when he showed up, but instead killed him and persecuted his saints, God gives judgment to the saints, apostles, and prophets by bringing her to the ground. The system that persecuted the apostles and prophets and the saints and Jesus himself is ended. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. They literally wiped that city off the map. And of course, the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft. This is a great city, right? This is not just a dicky old town where there happened to be a temple there. No, this is a very, very prosperous, great city, full of trade. Many people have become rich because of the trade there. The sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. The light of the lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. Your father is the devil. I just keep hearing Jesus say that. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all who have been slain in the earth. Remember Jesus's words again. Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Where? O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. Your house is left to you desolate. So we've seen the first woman, the prostitute, the judgment against the prostitute. Now, in Revelation comes forth another woman, right? You might be remembering back to some story in the Old Testament where a prophet married a prostitute in a symbolic sign to Israel back then. Okay. One woman is judged and put away, who is the prostitute, the unfaithful prostitute. And now a new woman emerges. The unfaithful prostitute is apostate Israel, whom God called his wife, who broke covenant and became this apostasy and persecuted him. Now another woman comes forth in Revelation, which is a major theme, not only here in Revelation, but in the entire New Testament. Stick with me. The second of two women, she's called the wife of the Lamb. Revelation 21:9, then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the last seven plagues, spoke to me, saying, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And here we see the mystery, a great mystery, it says elsewhere, Paul writes, we'll read it, being fulfilled. This is the result. This bride, this second woman, who is a city herself, this is the result of the Lamb who was slain, the worthy one, the prophesied one to bring out of apostate natural Jerusalem the spiritual heavenly Jerusalem. Do you see that? This is one of the reasons why he is praised as the worthy one, because he brought out of apostate Jerusalem and judged her, and emerging from her came another city, the heavenly Jerusalem, who is also a woman, who is a spiritual woman, as he is a spiritual man, the wife of the Lamb. Out of judgment, this judgment prophesied against the city and the temple, the apostate Israel. Out of judgment comes redemption. The prostitute is judged and put away, and the righteous bride is revealed and reigns with him. The natural temple is destroyed, and a spiritual temple is brought forth. This is the mystery of godliness and the plan from the foundation of the world. Let's explore this concept briefly, and we're coming to an end here. The barren woman brings forth the promised city. Isaiah writes about it. Isaiah 54:1, sing, O barren one who did not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than the children of her who is married, says the Lord. Verse 11, O afflicted one, storm-tossed and not comforted, behold, I will set your stones in antimony and lay your foundations with sapphires. I will make your pinnacles of agate and your gates of carbuncles and all your wall of precious stones. So he's talking about a woman, but referring to her as a city. All your children will be taught by the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. In righteousness you shall be established. You shall be far from oppression, for you shall not fear, and from terror, for it shall not come to you. So Isaiah 54 is the prophetic foundation for the jeweled city. Who is that? The wife of the Lamb.
I don't understand.
I'm not talking to you, Siri. The jeweled city, the wife of the Lamb, the heavenly Jerusalem of Revelation 21, when it gives that description of this city coming down from heaven, which is not a city at all. It's not a woman at all. It's a people. It is the church. Who does Isaiah's woman represent? Paul quotes Isaiah 54 when he is explaining these things himself. Natural Jerusalem is contrasted by Paul with Jerusalem from above when he quotes Isaiah 54. Let's go to Galatians chapter 4, where he writes about it. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman has been born through promise. Now, this may be interpreted allegorically. These two women are two covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now, Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present what? Jerusalem. For she is in slavery with her children. Now you're going to start to understand what all these guys wrote in the New Testament. But Jerusalem above, there's two Jerusalems here, two women, two covenants. Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, rejoice, and here's the quote from Isaiah 54 we just read, rejoice, O barren one who does not bear, break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor, for the children of the desolate one will be more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him, describing present-day Jerusalem and the persecution against the prophets and Jesus and the saints. Born according to the flesh persecuted him, who was born according to the Spirit. So also it is now. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman, look at this, shall not inherit with the son of the free. Cast out the slave woman. Who does the slave woman correspond to? Jerusalem. Of course, Paul is speaking in reference to what Jesus himself spoke about concerning the desolation of the city and its temple, according to what is written and in keeping with the prophecies concerning the Messiah and his kingdom. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman, of the Jerusalem from above. So, two cities and two women emerge out of Revelation in keeping with everything that Jesus taught concerning the kingdom and the apostles taught concerning the kingdom and the church. We have apostate Jerusalem, two cities, two women. Apostate Jerusalem, the bondwoman, Mount Sinai, the old covenant, in bondage with her children, persecutes those who are born after the Spirit, kills the prophets and the saints, is spiritually called Babylon, Sodom, and Egypt. She is judged and cast out and replaced by, or replaced by is not the right way to say it. Emerging from her comes another woman, another city called Jerusalem, but not natural. Jerusalem of the promise, Jerusalem above, or as we know it, the kingdom of the sons of God. Jerusalem from above is the free woman, the mother of the children of promise, brought forth from Zion, a holy nation, established in righteousness, built with precious stones, married to the Lord, the bride, the Lamb's wife. So out of the apostate Jerusalem, naturally speaking, comes the righteous Jerusalem, spiritually speaking, the Jerusalem of promise. The natural Jerusalem was just the natural example of everything that was coming, because she represented a woman that was coming, that would be brought forth by the Lamb himself. Isaiah writes about this giving birth of this woman in Isaiah 66:5. Almost done. Hear the word of the Lord, you who tremble at his word, your brothers who hate you and who cast you out for my name's sake. Well, this is a theme here, isn't it? Have said, let the Lord be glorified, that we may see your joy, but it is they who shall be put to shame. The sound of an uproar from the city, the sound from the temple. What is this sound from the city and the temple? The sound of the Lord rendering recompense to his enemies. It's talking about the destruction of the city and the temple, the casting out of the woman who is the harlot, the prostitute, Jerusalem, apostate Israel. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard of such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall a land be born in a day, in one day? Shall a nation be brought forth in one moment? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring to the point of birth and not cause to bring forth, says the Lord? Shall I, who cause to bring forth, shut the womb, says your God? So what is Isaiah doing here? He's presenting these things in this order. Faithful people are hated and cast out by their brethren. A voice comes from the city and the temple. What is that voice? Does that sound? God rendering recompense or judgment against Jerusalem. And Zion brings forth her children. This is all birth pains, right? And this birth produces a new nation. It produces a new city. And it is the thing that was to come from the foundation of the world. A nation is born. This corresponds directly with the New Testament events that we've been going over. Apostate Jerusalem persecutes the saints. Judgment comes upon the city and the temple, and the children of promise are revealed as the true covenant nation. Peter uses this word nation in his own writings. He says in 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, you know this verse, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, the wife of the Lamb, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And we know that this Jerusalem in Revelation is presented as a bride, but before we read it in Revelation, let's read it in Isaiah 62, verse 1. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not be quiet until her righteousness goes forth as brightness and her salvation as a burning torch. The nations shall see your righteousness and all the kings of your glory, and you shall be called by a new name, and the mouth of the Lord, that the mouth of the Lord will give. Verse 3, you shall be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate, but you shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. As the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall God rejoice over you. And this is all language that's used in the New Testament, speaking of this woman, this new Jerusalem, this heavenly Jerusalem that comes out of her. Like Jesus said, come out of her. So this restored Jerusalem, which is this Jerusalem above, the heavenly Jerusalem, the city we see descending in Revelation 21, which is a woman, the wife of the Lamb, which is the church that was birthed because of Jesus's sacrifice. It receives a new name. It is seen by the Gentiles. It is no longer desolate. It is married. It is called the bride in whom God rejoices. This is not the Jerusalem Paul says is in bondage. Remember the natural Jerusalem? And her and her children are in slavery. It is the restored covenant city, redemption, who is Jerusalem above. So therefore, the whole point of Revelation is unfolding the judgment against the harlot and the unveiling of the wife of the Lamb who comes out of her, which is the mystery of godliness, this great mystery of Jesus joining himself as a husband to this wife of the church. And from this union, the whole world is going to come under divine order. And the reason it's called Revelation is because it is the revelation of Jesus Christ, who is the one found worthy to open the scrolls. And we're going to go through all that. I'm not going to talk about it here, but the opening of a scroll or the seal of a scroll does not mean, it was rolled up tight and had a little wax on it so nobody could open it. No, it means that the understanding was veiled until the worthy one came to open it and unveil it for all to see. That's why Revelation is called Revelation. It's the revelation of Christ who unveiled the mystery of all of these things. And unfortunately, for 99.9% of people out there in the church, it's still a horribly twisted mystery. But we're going to get the truth out there so people can understand it. It's the least mystical book in the whole Bible, I think, once you understand how to read it. The Revelation deliberately contrasts the two women in two cities. Number one, the prostitute, just a little review, and then we'll end. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute, who is the city, Jerusalem, the natural city, the harlot. The woman is identified as the great city, the prostitute. Verse 18, and the woman that you saw, the angel says, is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. Her crime is the blood of the saints, as seen here. We've already read it, but review Romans 18:24 or Revelation 18:24. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. Her judgment vindicates the apostles and prophets because she is the great persecutor, not only of the prophets, but the New Testament, not only of Jesus, but the New Testament apostles and saints. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets. God has given judgment for you against her, meaning she has been burnt down. This whole thing has come crashing down. It's over. Jerusalem is not even a thing anymore. No stone, no building, nothing's there. It's done. It's finished. All of its occupants are even killed. Now, the other woman is the bride, as we have said. After the prostitute has been judged, one of the same seven angels says this in Revelation 21:9. One of the seven angels who had seven bowls filled with the last seven plagues came to me and talked to me, saying, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. So we have, I will show you the prostitute. Now, I will show you the bride. This is all on purpose because we're contrasting these two, showing the purpose here. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Of course, this is not an actual city, and this is not an actual woman. It is speaking of a people, a holy nation, as we read from Peter. The bride is not living inside the city. No. The bride is represented by the city. The bride is the Lamb's wife, the holy Jerusalem, the city descending from heaven. Paul's Jerusalem is what it's describing, which is above. Revelation 21, which is describing this holy city, talks about all of these bejeweled city, right? It's not talking about a literal city that's got walls and jewels and gates. No, it's us, right? But Revelation 21 is using Isaiah 51's city imagery. We just read it, right? Remember, Paul quoted it when he was talking about the two women that he contrasted, natural Jerusalem, who is in slavery, and the Jerusalem who is our mother, the city of promise, this new covenant fulfillment from the foundation of the world. Here's how Revelation 21 describes it using Isaiah's prophecy as imagery. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. We'll talk about these things a little more in depth, the meaning of some of this stuff. But just for now, understand this is not just a random thing here. This comes from Isaiah because all of the prophets, remember, the vengeance of these days are to fulfill all that is written. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with every kind of jewel. The first was jasper, sapphire, agate, emerald, onyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, and amethyst. 12 stones, by the way. This corresponds to the 12 stones of the priests who would minister once a year in the Holy of Holies. We'll again talk about it later. From Isaiah's prophecy, right, the similar language we see. Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah 54, lay your foundations with sapphires. I'll make your pinnacles of agate, your gates of carbuncles, and your wall of precious stones. So Isaiah's restored woman city that he prophesied of is Revelation's New Jerusalem, which is the church. And I'll end here with Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one has ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother, which is an Old Testament quote, and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Then he says this phrase I've quoted a couple times: the mystery is profound. This mystery is profound. And I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So even Paul understands all of these things, written to the first century Jewish Christians. They understood all of these things perfectly, because they understood the kingdom, they understood Jerusalem, they understood the prophets, and they understood the fulfillment of all these things. Christ and the church. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. There's a lot to be said here and a lot to be taught. But just in the first two lessons, talking about the purpose of God bringing salvation through Christ, which is to bring the earth into order, and the prophecies that come along with the appearance of Christ and his kingdom, which includes judgment of apostate Israel and redemption of Israel through the New Jerusalem, through the preaching of Jesus and the work of the early church, we see emerge from her a bride, the wife of the Lamb, as prophesied from old. And John is writing these things, and we'll go into the history of a little more as we go. He's writing these things just prior to the events of 70 AD, reminding everyone what Jesus said, reminding them what's coming. God himself, let's leave John out of it for a second. God himself is reminding everyone of what's coming, of what's happening, and what is to come, and that these things that were spoken by Jesus are true and they will come to pass, like he said when he said, according to what is written. And it's all part of the plan. It's all part of what's been laid out from the foundation of the world. And it is spoken in plain verbiage, right? In plain verbiage. If you can see the context, you can see the timeline, and you can see how it was fulfilled. It is airtight, rock solid, no room for deviation, and no room for error. And you can see now how people have gone so far out of the context. They've cherry-picked these verses, not understanding what's been prophesied, not even understanding what Jesus himself said. In fact, you can't even really understand the four Gospels unless you understand Revelation, because much of what Jesus taught and spoke about and warned about and was preparing people for is what God brings out in Revelation. But Revelation is not just a book of judgment, it is a book of redemption, because the plan the whole time was for this city of promise, who is above, who is a people, who is the wife of the Lamb, to come out of Jerusalem, and also for all nations to come into her and become this new nation, this holy city, this wife of the Lamb, this church, this government of God that will bring all things in the heavens and the earth back again to their original state. What an amazing, what wisdom, what a glorious plan, what a glorious story to tell. It's amazing. It's jaw-dropping. It's like the greatest movie plot you've ever watched or heard of or seen. And it's all already unfolded. And that's why we're in the time of the reign of Christ, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, the reigning of his kingdom through his saints, because he is now seated and has brought forth the wife, this heavenly city, the New Jerusalem. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, this is really hurt them on in church because they haven't deciphered this. I guess they haven't um taught this in the proper context, have they?
No, most people don't understand these things. I want you guys to understand it. I'm leaving the rest of the church out of it. They're not here tonight. I want you guys to understand it. I want you to get it so that you can tell others about it.